guest, of course, is Stefan Verstappen. And our topic will be systemic poverty. Where does it come from? And yeah, Stefan, I watched your video that you did on poverty, and a lot of it has to do with taxes.
Mm.
So, but it's not just the taxes from our payslip. It's not just the taxes that we pay in the shops. There's much more to it. So could you walk us through that?
Okay, well, the reason for poverty is the same in every country in the world, and that is government. I don't know where people got the idea that government is for the people and by the people and all that. The government has been, and always will be the greatest enemy of humanity. And I tried to explain it in my video, Defense Against the Psychopath, that when you have hierarchies of power, and here we get into the pyramid, it's a pyramid structure. All these institutions have a pyramid structure where the person at the top has all the power and the people at the bottom have only a little bit of power. But whenever you have that kind of a structure, and that structure exists in mainstream religion, it exists in all governments. Every government has that pyramid structure, and it exists in corporations. So when you have that kind of a structure, it will attract every psychopath on the planet, because that's what psychopaths crave. They crave power and money, but mostly power. Money only as far as it gives them more power. And so now you have every psychopath in the country competing for every position and everything from town councilor to a local city mayor, to provincial employees. It's all full with psychopaths. And that's why, and it's always been that way. It's always been that way since earliest recorded history. And that's why government is always going to be evil. Even if it was somehow possible to have a government populated by people that have integrity and honesty, even if it was possible, let's say we have a magic wand and we can turn all these people into, decent, honest people. The government still cannot have empathy for the people because it's a collective. A collective can never have empathy. Individuals, you and me, we can have empathy, we can have compassion, we can worry about our fellow man. The government, being a collective, cannot worry about that. It is going to follow the internal playbook of all organizations, and it cannot care about you. So the government, even if you had good people in there, the government cannot care about you. And the fact is, we don't have good people. We never did have good people. Forget about, the golden days of politics so we could vote. No, that never existed. We'll vote them out. No, there hasn't been an honest election in at least 200 years. And I would argue there has never, ever been an honest election. They're always going to be tampered with because psychopaths rule the world. They don't care about honest elections. They care about getting power. And so guaranteed they will throw every election. You can go back. Clear example of this is New York City in the 1860s with Tammany Hall, which was an Irish gang that sort of ran New York for a while. And they would have elections to elect the mayor. And the mayor of Tammany Hall, or mayor of New York back in those days, was the most corrupt, psychopathic character. Well, what happened during the elections? Well, they had all the gangsters, all the hoods, all the thugs from the 5 Points neighborhood, and you've seen the movie Gangs of New York. Well, all those gangs worked for the politician, And they stood out in front of the voting booths and made sure that anybody that went in there voted for the corrupt mayor. And anybody that didn't vote for the corrupt mayor will get the shit beat out of them by the thugs. So already going back 150 years, you couldn't even have an honest mayoral election.
So how would they know what somebody voted for?
Because they would go into the voting booth with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, they went.
And that was allowed?
Of course not.
Yeah, but I mean, in that, if you say they were standing in front of the where people did the election, then and they went with them into the voting booth, that means that somebody, did nothing against it.
No, they did nothing. Who's going to do something against it? The police? The police were more corrupt than the gangsters. This is all well known back in those days. And this is always what happens when you have psychopaths running things. So they're hand in hand with organized crime, always. We know that the Kennedys are good friends with organized crime, and many politicians, they're all in bed with it, with the mafia or excuse me, with whoever. They were always in bed with the organized crime. And the police, for the most part, were always corrupt. The reason for that is because the governments wouldn't pay the police enough. And so in order to earn a living, the police had to resort to, extortion and writing tickets. Well, they're doing that right now in mainland China. The Chinese government, the CCP, is completely run out of money. The entire country is a basket case. I don't know why people think China is a threat. They're not a threat. They're going to implode. There's going to be millions, if not tens of millions, of Chinese starve to death in the next couple of years because of the mishandling of the Communist Party. But look at what they're doing now. The police there, they don't have money to pay the police. So what the police do is they set up roadblocks on all the major highways, and they pull over everybody that's driving a motorcycle or an e-bike. And they're saying, oh, well, it's not compliant with code, or there's, you have a violation, or your license isn't up to date, or whatever, and they confiscate all those vehicles, hundreds of thousands of motorcycles, and they put them on the back of trucks, and they drive them all out to this big parking lot where they have acres and acres of motorcycles all just stored there. And the owners, if they want their motorcycle back, have to pay a fine to go get it. So this is the way police forces have worked for almost since the beginning. In order to pay themselves, they have to resort to fines and punishments and extortion. You have to pay the cops to make sure they don't arrest you. So you have, a corrupt government, you have a corrupt police department, and you have a bunch of gangsters, and they control the voting process. Things have not changed much since then. So voting doesn't work. Everybody should know that by now. I don't know why people still think that government and voting should work. So anyways, to answer your question, the government is responsible for just about every evil in the world, because you are being ruled by the equivalent of serial killers. You've got Jeffrey Dahmer, you've got John Wayne Gacy, you've got the Green River Killer, except now they're wearing suits and they call themselves mayor and congressman and president. But there's no difference. They're all psychopaths. I tried to warn people about the nature of psychopaths. They're an evil that you cannot comprehend. Most normal people would never get their head around how evil these people are. Look, so whatever horror movie you've ever seen, you got to understand that politics is worse than any horror movie you've seen. These people are monsters. And so, well, why are we poor? Well, because the psychopaths stole all your money. And one of the ways they steal your money is through taxes. So what happens is, I did a deep dive on this to try and figure out what the exact numbers are. And I put it in the video to the best of my ability. So your income tax is like 40%, right? 30 to 40% income tax. That's right off the top. Before you even get the money in your hand, the government's already taken its share. Now remember, if you remember Robin Hood in England, and they forced the evil King John to sign the Magna Carta, which was the first document limiting the power of the monarchy, and sort of founded the basis for the modern day Constitution of the United States. But what they don't tell you, because Robin Hood stole from the rich to give to the poor. He didn't steal from the rich. He stole from the tax collectors. They always leave that out of the story because they don't want to give people any ideas, right? So when the tax collectors came from village to village and they siphoned up all the wealth of these poor villages, and this, of course, is just fable. But anyways, this is the official fable. He stole the tax money back from the tax collectors, and they gave it back to the villagers. So, but what they don't tell you is that at that same time, there was one of the biggest insurrections, revolts against the monarchy in English history. And the reason that the English people finally had enough was because King John had raised the tax rate to 5%. 5%, right? And the whole country goes up in flames, and they march on the castles, and they got a hold of King John, and they sat him down and forced him to sign that document. As soon as he got back to his own castle, he ripped it up, said, I'm not following it, typical psychopath, right? Like, oh yeah, okay, I won't tax you so much. And then he gets back into power and he's safe. Then it's like, I'm going to tax the bastards to death, which of course he tried to do, but he didn't last much longer after that. But what I'm saying is that when people are taxed at even 5% back in the Middle Ages, they rose up in arms. Now we're paying minimum right off the top, 30 to 40%. That's 600 times more taxes. And we just keep paying it. And how many people do you hear complain about the taxes anymore? How many protests are there against taxes? Oh, we got protests about tranny this and LGBT that and Black Lives Matter. Oh my God, lots of protests about that, but not a peep about you are being taxed literally to death. Okay, so, well, that's 30, 40%. Now, we got to add to that sales tax. Now, not every state in the United States has a sales tax. We have two here in Canada. We have the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, and then we have the GST, I forget what the other one is, which is 8%, and then there's another tax for 7%. And then there's a third tax that harmonizes the sales tax and the goods and services tax, and that's called the HST, which is the harmonized sales tax. Oh, they harmonized it for you. So now it's 15% on everything, okay? Oh, wonderful. So now instead of, let's take the low number, 30% of your income is taxed. Let's take the low number. You're now paying 15% on top of that every time you spend your money. 15% here in Canada. So now your tax rate is 45%. But wait a minute. There's also provincial tax, and there's state tax, state income tax, which adds up to another 5%. In the United States, most states are about 5%, and most of my studies have been done on the US. So now you're 50%. 50% of everything you make is stolen by the government, but it doesn't stop there. What people don't understand is that everything else is a tax too. Now you got property tax. Now you've got when you get your driver's license, that's a tax, for Christ's sakes. Why do you got to pay the government for a piece of paper? Why? So, and then your automobile license, that's a tax. And then when you want to get a permit to build a deck on your house, you have to pay for that. That's a tax. So I didn't even add those taxes up in my calculations, but there's a whole bunch of other taxes that you're paying all the time anyways. If it's money that goes to the government in exchange for nothing, what's a piece of paper, right? And even now, it's not even a piece of paper. It's just something on the computer that they send you an email. So you're paying money to the government for absolutely nothing. But we're already at 50%. Now, the other thing that people don't understand is, in addition to all these taxes already, there is another tax, and you won't hear anybody talk about it. I've never seen a YouTube video or a newspaper article about this other tax. I'm the only one that's done that. And it's what's called a hidden tax or an embedded tax. Now, what that means is, in the products that you buy, there is a tax. You have to pay it. What people don't understand is that you pay, and by you, I mean working middle class people. The rich don't pay taxes, and the poor don't pay taxes. So that just means the working class, the blue collar, the white collar, the middle class people, they pay all the taxes for everything. Because of basic bookkeeping. So let me explain basic bookkeeping. So when you're doing your books, right, you need to understand what your expenses are. And then your expenses need to be balanced against your income as a business, right? So I got to add up all my expenses. Let's say, I have a small business, so I got to add up rent on my business. I got to add up, payments on the machinery. If I need machinery, whether it's a Coke machine or a planer or a saw or something like that, you got to add up all your equipment and your maintenance and your, if you have employees, you got to add up the wages. And by the way, you also have to pay employee income tax. People don't know that your boss has to pay income tax on you. And in order for him to pay income tax on you, guess what they do? They pay you less because they can't afford to pay. What was I looking at? They just raised the goddamn taxes here in Canada again. That's all they do is to raise it. Now it's on beer, now it's on everything else, and then it's carbon tax. And I was reading through how much extra it's going to cost, and it's going to cost the average Canadian extra $937 for the carbon tax, and it's going to cost employers an extra $1,200 tax on top of the income tax for their employees. So we're still at 50%, right? That's just what they steal from you personally. But you are paying much more than that because you're paying for all these other things that are taxes, and you're getting paid less because your employer has to pay a payroll tax on you, and they can't afford to do that, so they're going to make sure you get less money. But now we have the embedded tax. And the way the embedded tax, wait a minute, let me just step back for a minute. So we pay all the taxes. The working class, people that work, 60 hours a week, and, basically white people, pay all the taxes. We have to pay all the taxes for everybody because, I'll give you an example. I remember when they, in the United States, they said, we're going to raise the taxes on the rich oil companies. And everybody went, yeah, let's get those rich oil companies to pay the taxes. Did you notice that the price of gas went up $2 a gallon the next day? Did you notice that? Because The oil companies are not paying the taxes. They're raising the cost of gas, and you're paying the taxes. Again, this is how it works with everything. For example, let's say I made the example in the video about a cutting board. So you got a lumberjack. He cuts down the tree for the cutting board. Well, he has to pay tax. He has to pay tax on the tree and on the permits and on the trucks and on the saws. He has to pay a lot of tax and income tax too. So when he sells that log, he can't sell it just for the cost. He has to add in the cost of doing business, which is tax. You cannot stay in business. You cannot say, oh, well, I'm not going to charge my customers the tax that I owe, because that wouldn't be fair to my customers. Instead, I'll just charge them the money for the overhead for producing the product or service, and I will go bankrupt. Because the tax that businesses have to pay are 20 to 50%. So you cannot just say, oh, well, I'll just pay that 20 to 50% out of my own pocket. I won't send my kids to college because I'm going to pay the tax. So no, that's not how business. Everybody would be bankrupt in a month if that's the way it worked. So every business must include their tax burden in assessing what price they charge for their service or product. So now whatever you buy, so in the case of the cutting board, well, so the lumberjack has all these taxes. He puts the cost of the tax into the logs. Now he sells the logs to the lumber yard. Lumberyard has a lot of taxes to pay. They got to pay the machinery bills and their hydro, and they got to pay for their property taxes and their rents, taxes on rents and permits and their employee. So the lumberyard adds the cost of those taxes into the lumber. Now that lumber goes to a manufacturer. Well, the manufacturer has a lot of tax to pay, and he cannot pay those taxes himself. So when he cuts up that lumber into boards, he's got to add the cost of all those taxes he's paid into the cost of those boards. And so when you buy a cutting board, you're paying the lumberjack's taxes, you're paying the lumberyard's taxes, you're paying the manufacturer's taxes. It's all included in the cost of that board. Now, I've tried to find out what percentage of the cost of an item can be attributed to the embedded taxes. Now, you can imagine what a nightmare it must be like when you buy a car, because you're paying taxes for every bolt, you're paying taxes on every piece of wire, you're paying taxes on every light bulb, you're paying taxes on every component, every piece of steel, every rivet. You're paying the taxes of all these multiple suppliers that supply parts that they bolt together to make a car. You're paying taxes on all of it. So nobody knows. I researched it. I went as deep as I could. How much of a product can be, or the cost of a product can be attributed to the embedded taxes? Conservative, because even forensic accounting teams can't figure it out. You couldn't figure it out even if you tried. You could get 10 guys into your office and say, well, we paid 10 cents on this beer, and we paid 5 cents on this cigarette, and we paid. They couldn't figure it out. But the most conservative estimate is 25%. 25%. So now they're already taking 50% from you, plus 25%. So that's what you're paying now already. But if we add in all the other taxes, the property taxes and the permits and all the other stuff you have to pay the government for, you add that all in, you're looking at 80, 85% easy. So that means the government, everybody's government, more or less, give or take 10%, is stealing 85% of everything you earn. 85%. So why are you poor? Well, because you work for $10 an hour, you get to keep $2.50. No, you get to keep $1.50. $1.50. Now imagine if the taxes were only all the taxes embedded and everything like that. We're cut in half. You're still paying 40% taxes. 40%, which is already 800 times more than the people in England rose up in rebellion for. But let's say that's what all they're paying, 40%. That would mean you have doubled, more than doubled your income, your purchasing power. So if you were making $100,000 a year, but now you're only paying 40%, that's equal to making $220,000 a year. Do you think you would be poor if you were making $220,000? Or let's say you're on the low end. You're earning, just above poverty level, $35,000 a year. If they didn't charge you, say 40% less tax, that $35,000 would have the purchasing power of earning $70,000 a year. Do you think there'd be all these homeless people if they were making $70,000 a year? A lot of people that make $35,000 live in their cars. I know a few of them. So that's why we're poor. That's why there's eternal poverty, because the government ruled by evil psychopaths, and they all are. Don't think there's a good one in government. There isn't. Forget this white hat story. Forget about Q. There are no good people in government. There are no good people in government. They wouldn't get into office if there was a slight chance that they had a conscience. They would be filtered out, and that's why I put that documentary, Defense Against the Psychopath. They got to understand how that works, why we are always ruled by lunatics and psychopaths. So that's why you're poor. The government steals all your money, one way or the other. Now, the other way they steal your money is through inflation. And then the other way they steal their money is through debt. So as if it's not bad enough that they take 85% of everything you've ever earned. I mean, could you retire? Let's say you work 20 years of your life and you're 40 years old. Could you retire at 40 if you were able to get 20 years worth of wages back? Of course you could retire. Of course you could retire. Everybody would retire at 40. And I don't even add in other things as well. It's mind-boggling. We're up to close to 95%. Everything we've ever touched or bought or paid for, money that went to the government. Because the other thing, too, is we don't take into account the efficiency of machinery and technological advances. You see, with all the technology and all the advances we have and the way we are able to exploit the wealth of the land, we should all be millionaires. We really should. So that the fact that there's anybody sleeping in the street is, to me, an abomination. I'll give you another example. It used to be let's say back to the 1890s, in the lumber industry. It would take 6 guys to chop down a tree. 6 guys. So you had to pay salaries on 6 guys. But now we have an automatic machine that grabs the tree, cuts it, strips it, loads it on a truck. Automatic, 1 guy now does that. Now there is an initial outlay of capital to pay for the machine. So let's say it's the equivalent to 6 men's salaries for 5 years. Okay, I'm just making these numbers up, but let's say it's something like that. This is what you paid for that machine. 6 salaries for 5 years. Now, after that, you don't have to pay those salaries. And you've already bought the machine. And you only have to hire 1 guy. Where does all that money you saved go to? What happened to it? That's why I say, we should have been millionaires. Well, the big corporations kept it, of course. But then the big corporations are, again, run by psychopaths. So why wouldn't they keep it? Why wouldn't they screw you? They're not going to say, listen, we don't have to hire those other 6 guys. So for every 1 guy we do hire, we're going to pay you triple the wages. That never happens, They're still going to pay you at poverty level. So that's why we're poor, Judith. It's the government. It's always been the government. Even when you read ancient history, oh my God, it was tax, 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 tax. And that's where all the money goes.
Mm. So some people would tell you now that, yeah, well, the government also provides services like building roads, bridges, schools, healthcare, what have you. What would you say to that?
Well, all of that used to be taken care of by communities in the past. So,
Hmm.
let's go back to medieval age times again, Robin Hood. So you have a village, let's say it's sheep farmers, and they have the sheep for wool. So they have a wool market in town. But it's difficult for people to get to town because there's a river. They got to cross the river, and the ferry can only carry so many. So it's inefficient to trade in that town because you have to take the ferry. Now, what happens is all the sheep farmers pool their money and they build a bridge. It's in one of those movies. I forget which one.
Hmm.
It's the people in the towns and communities. They pool their money. They volunteer their labor. They build the bridge. They build the roads to get access because it makes it more efficient for them because they will make more money if they do that.
Hmm.
So if they're not going to make more money, then they're not going to do it. So fine, then it's a little bit inconvenient to go out and visit this house out in the countryside. But where it counts, the villages and the cities, they always traditionally took care of those activities themselves. Same thing with medical care. You got to understand anything run by the government is always a disaster. Everything the government touches turns to shit. So the government cannot run a healthcare system. It can't because you got psychopaths in charge, and then below the psychopaths are whole armies of total morons that can't do anything right. So I know here in Canada we have free healthcare. Um, Try to get an appointment with the doctor. Go to an emergency room with a heart attack and wait 14 hours in a chair in the reception area. I mean, so now what did they do in the past? Brings me back to what I've been preaching for the last 5 years is forming communities and mutual aid societies. So in the past, who provided medical and healthcare? It was the mutual aid societies. It was the foresters. It was the Elks Club. It was the Oddfellows Club. It was, the women of the Southern Revolution or whatever. They had all kinds of funny names, but it was people pooling their money. And the way these mutual aid societies worked was a membership fee of 1 day's wages per year. And for your 1 day's membership fee, you were provided with free health care for the whole year. That's who provided health care. Not only did that work out very well, because again, as soon as the government takes control of something, they loot it from top to bottom. And so whatever money is spent for health care, we're going to, budget so many $billions for healthcare. Yeah, but by the time that money actually gets down to the nurses and doctors, 80% has been stolen by the bureaucrats and the senators and the kickbacks and the congressmen, and everybody's in there with their hand in that kitty. They're all taking gobs and gobs of cash. So what money is left that actually goes to build the hospital and hire the staff is very small. Now, when you run that yourself through a mutual aid society, 100% of the money you collect goes to the hospital. So these mutual aid societies are more efficient because you don't have 10,000 psychopaths trying to steal money. You have people that that are working class people, Often, they'll do these mutual aid societies according to your industry. So if you're a carpenter, you might belong to a carpenter's club, and everybody that's in the club is a fellow carpenter. And again, this only works in what we call a high trust society, which is what we used to have before a certain group of people infiltrated our countries and started spreading this nonstop poison that everybody's evil, everybody's out to screw you, you got to be careful. No, everybody's not evil. I still get this all the time. They're all evil. No, stop listening to the TV, okay? Not everybody in the world is evil. There are still good people. We trust each other. We work together. So going back to these mutual aid societies, like the foresters, they're still around to this day. But they don't do what they used to do. It was completely different. Well, because the government came in and destroyed all these mutual aid societies. They targeted them specifically, the government and the Rockefeller Medical Association. They went after these guys and made sure that they were all put out of business within a couple of decades. They were all gone. But before the government and the Rockefellers came after them, the money they collect and making sure that all that money is spent actually going to the doctors and the nurses, they built their own hospitals. They built modern 8-story tall hospitals with terminal care. They even built their own old age homes. They even bought their own cemeteries. All of that was paid for by people with their annual fee, 1 day's work. So today would be, let's say, your yearly fee would be between $150 and $200. That's what most people make in a day, right? That would be all you had to pay. And from that $100 to $200 that the association received, they had so much, because you receive it year after year after year after year. You have, 20,000 members, 30,000 members, because people see how successful this is, and they go, wait a minute, I'd like to get in on this healthcare system. Well, how do I join? Wow, $100 a year. Okay, $100 a year, I'm in. So the memberships rose to hundreds of thousands of people in some instances. Now you're talking millions and tens of millions of dollars. And all of it goes to doing what it's supposed to do. And there was an excess. There was more money than they could spend. And that's when they started building their own hospitals, their own medical clinics, their own dentists, their own retirement homes, and not only that, they still had so much money that they started doing summer camps for the kids, and they started giving scholarships to send members to university, which a lot of them still do now, like the Rotarians and the Lions Club. They all have scholarships for the children of their members, and they try to send, a couple of dozen of them to college every year. Every little tiny Rotarian club, that's what they do now. And that's what these associations used to do. And it was also groups like the Rotarians and the Lions Club that raised money to build bridges and to fix roads. They did all that. So we do not need the government. They provide no service. It's a myth that we need that because they provide. No, they don't provide any service. What they provide is garbage, inefficiency that they charge you 80% of your wages to pay for, leaving you impoverished, and they don't actually accomplish anything. It used to be all done by the people themselves. Like I said, going all the way back into the Middle Ages, that's where the Masons first started. Now, the Masons back then, completely different than the Masons we have today. There's
very different animal back then, yeah.
Very big. Back then, it was like a union, and it was like a mutual aid society, and they pooled their money, and that's how they did it back then. Now, of course, it was again those special people that infiltrated the Masons and turned it into a secret society.
Mm.
And, oh, Christ's sakes, get real. All you folks, you belong to a secret society. Wake up, okay? If you have to take a vow of secrecy, you are working for psychopaths. I never require anybody to take a vow of secrecy when I mentor them or when I teach them martial arts or when I do my counseling or anything like that. Oh, but keep this secret. Never tell anybody what I... Why? If you're above board, if you have integrity, why would you need people to keep your secret? What secret? Oh, dirty little secrets. Oh, of course, dirty little secrets. So that's what happened. We used to do it all ourselves. Then the psychopaths came into the government. And now the Rockefellers hated the mutual aid societies because one way the mutual aid society was able to cut down on medical costs was, number one, they were allopathic. So there was no pharmaceutical industry that they had to support. These doctors weren't prescribing OxyContin to everybody that walked in the room, okay? And they weren't prescribing a half a dozen medications and making the pharmaceuticals. So those guys had to go. Rockefeller said, no, we can't have these guys saying, okay, go home, pick some dandelions, make a tea, and get some blueberries and make a tea. And so they were healing them through natural means. That had to end. And the other thing that really pissed off the medical association, because that's the whole reason the medical association was established, the AMA in the United States. The whole raison d'etre for that organization was to drive honest doctors out of business, because now everybody had to be licensed through the AMA with another tax. That's all it is, just another filter in the hierarchy. And because what happened was the private members associations, the mutual aid societies, one way that they saved on their medical expenses, in addition to not prescribing drugs, was they would hire one or two doctors to work only for them. So this is what they did. Went to a doctor, said, how much money do you need to make a year to be comfortable? Let's say $100,000 a year. Doctors make more than that now, but their malpractice insurance sucks up 50% of that. Malpractice insurance is like $15,000 a month. It's absolutely insane. But, who runs the insurance agencies? But yeah. So what would happen was the doctor would say, I'm happy with $100,000. Fine. We will pay you $100,000 a year, no matter what. So whether or not the doctor works 16 hours a day or 6 hours a day, he gets the same money. So there is no incentive for him to make sure people stay sick, right? As a matter of fact, the sooner he can get them healthier, the less time he has to go and visit them. And in those days, most of these doctors came to your house. Even when I was a child, we had a doctor come to my house.
Mm-hmm. I can remember that, yeah.
Yeah. So the doctor would come to your house. He worked for the Mutual Aid Society, and he would take care of all the members. He would come to your house. He'd look after. He'd make sure you were healthy, because the healthier you were, the more time he had to go to the golf course. Right? So where's the incentive, right? Like, listen, money is a great incentivizer, and you have to know how to use it to incentivize people to be honest. Psychopaths always use money to incentivize people to be evil. But if you've got a decent, high trust community, the doctor wants to make sure you're healthy. So that had to go. So the American Medical Association said to the doctors, if you work for a mutual aid societies, you will not be licensed by the AMA. So a lot of them resisted. They continued working for him, but then, of course, the government came in, and it was, a bunch of other organizations came in and regulate this and pass bylaws so that eventually, not the doctors couldn't work anymore, and they had to go over to the allopathic medicine and prescribed drugs, and they had to go through their 8-year indoctrination program called medical school, which was like 90% busy work. They're not being taught how to heal human beings. So it's busy work. That's all when the poor doctors, they're up 20 hours a day, when they're in internship and all for no reason. All for no reason. There's no reason doctors have to stay up 20 hours a day as intern. There's no for what? What? What's so important? Well, what's so important is that it wears them out and wears them down. And now, at the end of it all, they spent $250,000 for their education. They've lost 7 years of productive time, right? They didn't earn money while they were in medical school. So 7 years of your income is gone, never existed. Plus you're in debt up to here. You better do what the American Medical Association does, because if they pull your license, and we've seen now what happened in the last few years, where there was a few honest doctors that came out and tried to warn people about what this was doing, I can't say it, we'll both get banned again. They all got unlicensed.
Yeah.
So now, $250,000, 7 years of your life, you can't ever practice medicine again. What are you going to do? I mean, that's the hold they have over the doctors. So that's why modern doctors, you can't trust them, because they are heavily controlled by the same psychopathic forces. They're Rockefellers and so
on. Before we started recording, we briefly talked about Kenya and other African countries where there is a lot of protest right now. And funny enough, in Kenya, it started because of taxes. It was called Finance Bill 2024. The Gen Zs told the government all over social media, don't vote for it, reject it, reject Finance Bill 2024. The parliament did not reject it, and then all hell broke loose. And since then, there is, unrest in the country. And every Tuesday and every Thursday, there are huge demonstrations all over the country. They bring Nairobi to a standstill. So far, 53 people have been killed because police there, they shoot with live bullets. And but the Gen Zs are saying, you can kill us, but you cannot kill our idea. And and because of that, it has, led to a lot of truth bombs, even in the Senate in Kenya. And what I found quite interesting, there's one senator that I have been observing for a while now, and he mentioned, if you ask our government, let's say, how many pupils do we have in primary school, secondary school, in the colleges, in universities? He said, I guarantee you, you will not get a list. You will not get any account of it. And I tell you now why. Because the whole system is designed so that MPs and senators can rip the money off, first fill their own coffers, and then the little rest goes to the school or whatever. And when I now listen to you, it appears to me it's not much different here. It's probably better cloaked, but it probably is the same way.
It is the same way. I've studied the history of Ancient China was a great example of how that worked. But so was ancient Japan. But so was the French monarchy. But so was, Russia. So was Holland. I mean, every country that has a government, this is what happens with government. That's why I said the number one enemy of humanity is government. And the reason is government will always be run by psychopaths. And the psychopaths will always rape, murder, steal everything they can get their hands on. They always do it. They always do that. Same thing with ancient China. They had a big rebellion there called the Taiping Rebellion back in, I think, 1880, something like that. And these Taiping, which, by the way, they were like Antifa. They were like nuts, right? They all thought their leader was the reincarnated brother of Jesus. This is China, where they still had the long pigtails and under the Ming Dynasty. Somehow they got Jesus. And they took over almost all of China. They were up against the walls in Beijing, and it looked like the Manchu dynasty was going to fall. Well, why? What happened to the Manchu army? Well, what happened to the Manchu army is what always happens. You see, you have the generals, and they have a list of all the soldiers, and they send that list to the bureaucracy in Beijing. They said, I need, money to pay 100,000 soldiers. So the government sends them money for 100,000 soldiers. But of course, there's not really 100,000 soldiers. There's 10,000 soldiers, right? But they, like you said, they have the list, and you're not going to get the true answer how many soldiers he really has. So he says, I got 100. So he puts the money for 90,000 soldiers in his pocket and then pays the 10,000 soldiers that he really has. Now, the country's in crisis. Send out the army. We've got, 2 million man army. Well, actually, no. Yeah, you've been paying for a 2 million man army, but you only got like 35,000 men.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. And guess what happened then? Oh, well, the Ming Dynasty needed help. Guess who they called for help? Britain and America. So the British sent their troops and the Americans sent their troops. They went in there, they wiped out the Taipings in short order. Like they wiped them out like very quickly. I don't know if you ever seen that movie Cartoon with Charlton Heston.
No. Cartoon?
Cartoon.
Cartoon, yeah, but such a long time ago, I have hardly any recollection of that.
He was battling the Mahdi in Somalia or the Sudan. And when he goes to visit the Mahdi, he brings out this really fancy robe. He says, I give you a gift. This was given to me by the Emperor of China. Well, Gordon Pasha was the general of the British Army that went 10 years earlier and saved China from the rebellion. That's where he got the fancy, the gown from. So anyway, the British and the American go and they kill all the Taipings. All right, the Ming Dynasty is saved. And they said, great, okay, we're going to go home now. But just before they went home, they looted the Forbidden City. They went in there, they stole everything that wasn't nailed down. They robbed the country from top to bottom. That's what happens. That's why, the guys there in Kenya, they're not going to tell you how many students they have because they're charging the government for so many students. But they don't have those students taking that money for themselves. So that's how that works.
Yeah. And the president of Kenya, Mr. Ruto, sometimes I'm really flabbergasted. He actually had the nerve to say that the Ford Foundation is funding all the unrest in Kenya. He cannot even comprehend that people that are hungry, jobless, and hopeless, finally find their voice step into their own power and say enough is enough. He cannot comprehend that. There has to be a foreign entity that is paying all those Gen Zs that are hitting the streets. And of course, none of it is true. I'm not saying that the Ford Foundation is a sacred organization. That is not what I mean. But it showed me how completely out of touch he is with the life of regular people.
Yeah. Well, there's two reasons for that. One, he's a psychopath. All right. There's no way you get to be the president of Kenya without being a psychopath, please. And psychopaths can't see themselves. That's one thing they don't have. They can't self-reflect. They don't have self-awareness. Plus, same thing with pathological narcissists. They can never think that anything they do is wrong. Everything they do is right. Oh, that 6-year-old had to be raped. I did the right thing. You know, they can't conceive of anything that they do could be wrong. So, of course, he's not going to take responsibility. Have any of these politicians ever, anywhere in the EU or the United States or Canada or anywhere in the world, ever got up on the stage and said, you know, we screwed up. We take responsibility for the high inflation. We take responsibility for the unemployment rate. We take Never. They never do that because they're all psychopaths. Psychopaths will never take responsibility. They have no guilt. They have no remorse. And they don't think they've ever done anything wrong. Oh, we had to kill those 20 million people because, you know, it was for the better of the society.
For the greater good.
Yeah, it was for the greater good. Yeah, we had to murder 200 million people for the greater good. They'll never take responsibility. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is always deflect. Always deflect. Right? That's the other thing that politicians do. Well, it wasn't me, it was the Republicans. No, it wasn't me, it was the Democrats. You know, on and on it goes. Of course you're going to blame somebody else. So, yeah, it's typical, but again, it's just typical natural behavior of governments. You know, like you know, if you're a hunter, you have to study the behavior of your prey. You know, you have to know where they go to drink water and what trails they use through the jungles, and you have to know what kind of animals they eat. So you go and hang around those animals and wait for them to come or whatever. Folks, we need to understand the jungle behavior of governments. And that's the jungle behavior. It's always going to be corrupt. It's always going to be steal, rob, lie, cheat. And when that doesn't work, then it's rape, torture, and murder by the tens of millions. Always, always throughout history. It's never been different. It never will be different. This is why, you know, we've been talking about this for a while. Judith, you're probably tired of me talking about this, but that's why we have to form communities.
Yeah.
Communities whereby we can separate ourselves as much as possible from government. You know, that's why we need to take care of our own health needs. We don't need the government. To this day, the foresters, the only thing they still do is they sell health insurance. So if you're a member of that mutual aid society called the Foresters, and by the way, the Foresters got their name based on, guess who? Robin Hood. So all they do now is they sell health insurance, but they sell at a big discount. So I forget what they pay there in the States. It's ridiculous, you know, $600, $800, $1,200 a month for health insurance. It's like a mortgage payment, my God. But you can get it a lot cheaper if you're a member of the Foresters. But the Foresters used to provide their own health insurance. So anyways, that's why we still, like, even if that's all we do, if we can't build our own hospital, like, you know, my community, we have a medical team, and we heal each other through all kinds. You know, after I had my heart incident last month, I I got all kinds of natural herbs, and cures, and extracts from my health team. I'm not on any prescription drugs because they told me, oh, you're going to have to take prescription drugs for the rest of your life, heart drugs for the rest of your life. No, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to go for the alternative methods. But even if you can't do that, you can't build your own hospital, you can't get your own medical team. And I recently recruited 2 women to join our community, and both of those women are naturopaths. They work at a clinic here in the town over. Very nice women. They're completely aware of what we're talking about. They know everything that we know. And we asked around town, the people in town, have we ever been to that clinic? Those women are wonderful. They did a great job. They healed my husband. They healed my wife, So they're really competent and reputable health practitioners, and they treat our members for free. For free. Mm-hmm. This is why these communities work. But let's say you can't do all that. You can't get there to where we are. The very least you can do is a variation on what the foresters do. And that is you form an insurance co-op. Now, for those of you that work for big companies, a lot of times these big companies will have insurance policies for their employees, right? So these insurance policies are a lot less than if you were to go by yourself and walk into an insurance brokerage and say, I need health insurance. Oh, they're going to charge you through the nose. But a company insurance policy, usually a better quality policy, lower deductible, more benefits and so on. And it costs you a lot less. Now, you can do that yourself. You get, 20, 30, 40 people together, everybody on your street, and you form a co-op. And now you go to an insurance provider and you say, we got 50 people that need health insurance. You buy the same kind of company health insurance policy that a corporation buys, because you have the power of, a scale. I'm not just going to pay, my $1,500 a month, but we got 50 people that are going to pay $1,000 a month. So now we got $50,000 a month. What kind of insurance policy can you provide us? So even there already you save, I'm going to guess, don't hold me to account, but probably you're going to be paying half price for your health insurance than other people pay. Half price. All you got to do is just work together with your neighbors, with your school board, with your soccer team, so that's how these things work, and that's why we have to stay away from government. It's the only way we can do this. We can't vote them out. We can't assassinate them.
Yeah, but while you're saying that, it's true. In the 20th century, the number one reason for unnatural death was government. And that is not really surprising. We had the nut jobs of Hitler, Pol Pot, Mao, we had the horrible wars.
Stalin,
Stalin, exactly. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so that's called democide. Democide means murder by your own government. And in the last century, the 19th century, no, 20th.
20th.
We're in the 21st century. Time goes so fast. I'm still waiting for my horse and buggy to take me into town. Where are they? We do have horses and buggies here all the time, up and down the side roads. It's the Amish. But anyways, in the 20th century, 260 million people were killed by their own government. So that's more than all the casualties and all the wars. So you're likely, you always have these charts. Number one cause of death, heart disease, cancer. No, actually, the number one cause of death is your government. It always has been. Because just from the government murdering its own citizens through starvation and mass executions and poisoning the water and all, that you got 280 million. But that doesn't include all the wars, all the casualties from wars. Well, who starts the wars? Judith, did you start the last war?
No.
You started it. No, you did.
And I'm not going to start the next one.
Well, who starts the wars? Your own government starts those wars. Look at what we see now. Oh my God. They're running around there in the United States and here in Canada. Justin Trudeau. Oh, let's give some more money to Zelensky. Oh, we've got to keep the war going. These are the assholes that start the wars, and they rob us blind to pay for it. So let's add to the 260, 280, 300 million. We don't even know. We don't even know that the government kills directly their own citizens. And do I have to go back and talk about all the times the government has sprayed a city to see what would happen, sprayed a city with poison or anthrax or poisoned the river, or the medical experiments that they've done, like getting people infected with VD, venereal diseases, and watching what.
Yeah. Deliberately infecting people with syphilis. That was a huge scandal in the United States.
Yeah. So we don't even count all those casualties yet. Yeah. We don't even count them. Now add to that all the casualties caused by war. The truth of the matter is World War I was totally unnecessary. And it was studying World War I that woke me up to the Psychopaths. Because I studied the history and I went, how could this happen? Who was in charge? How could they get these boys, 16, 17, 18-year-old boys, to sit in a mud hole for 3 years, freezing their asses off, constantly wet and dirty, and the rats are eating their toes? How can they do that? Now, I've studied a lot of military strategy. I could have ended World War I in 2 months because I would not have told everybody to dig a goddamn hole and sit in it. My God, it was just madness. And I remember thinking, who are these people that are running this war? Well, let's look at one, General Pershing. Oh, famous guy. He's got a big bronze statue at West Point, General Pershing. And they named a tank after him in World War II, the Pershing tank. Well, General Pershing, on October 11th, 1918, 3 hours before the war was going to end, right? Because it was 11/11/11, right? Launched a full frontal attack on German positions. And like 3,000 boys got shot. A full frontal attack on guys sitting with machine guns. It's insanity. It's just madness. It's like, if I were to tell all my students, get in your car and drive as fast as you can into that brick wall. I mean, of course, they're all going to die. That's what they know that was going to happen. And this bastard, General Pershing, who was a big hero, still is a big hero in America. He got the message from headquarters saying, we are going to sign the armistice at 11 o'clock today. That will end the war. And 2 hours before that, he launches a full-scale attack. Because why? Well, he didn't kill enough of his own troops. His own troops he's killing. This is the people we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with. So, World War I, completely unnecessary. The governments conspired to put that together. And it could have ended 2 years earlier, but no, they didn't want to let it end 2 years earlier because they're making too much money. World War II, I don't care what anybody, Hitler was not trying to take over the world. That was all bullshit. All he wanted to do is evict certain people that were causing a lot of trouble from his country. And who can blame him? I wish I could evict them from the United States and Germany and Canada and France. And it was completely unnecessary. All those poor, German farm boys and bakers' sons butchered and slaughtered. Never mind, things like Dresden and the war camps. What's his name? Put all those German prisoners of war, murdered.
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, he murdered like 2 million prisoners of war. 2 million
Mhm.
prisoners of war. He murdered them.
Reinwiesen. Mm.
Yeah. He stuck them
Yeah.
in the field, let them starve to death, and that was it. Easy way to kill people. All of those deaths are on the hands of government. So even if we, it's bad enough, the figures for genocide, but you can double, triple those figures when you include all the other stuff the government does to kill its own citizens, the wars and experiments and murdering and starving and injecting people with poison. And oh my God, it goes on and on and on. So on the list, major causes of death. Number one, your government. So don't for a minute think that the government's out to protect you or the government provides necessary services. I think I've already debunked that. They don't provide any necessary services. They just provide another excuse to tax you and rob you blind. That's what their services are. So that's the number one cause of misery in the world is your government. And the further you can separate yourself from your government, that's why I tell people too, incorporate. And if you're working for a company, tell them you want to be hired as a subcontractor, because as a subcontractor, you have all kinds of tax deductions. You can write off your mortgage payment. You can write off your car payment against your wages, right? Because I need a car to do my job. I'm a subcontractor. So you can write that all off against your taxes. As little money as you pay the government as possible. That should be the goal of everybody. So, incorporate. Like I do business under my name, Stefan. It's a business, right? So when I do my taxes once every 10 years, I deduct my rent, I deduct my internet, I deduct my telephone, I deduct my hydro, I deduct my heating, because all of this I need to do my business. So as much as possible, and a lot of this you can do by forming communities. We have our own food co-op, we have our own medical team, we have our own communications team, we have our own security team, we have our own political team that keeps track of what's going on with local politics. And oh my God, right, we could do another hour on what they're trying to do here in all these small towns. They recently passed a bunch of laws now that says the mayor now has what they call strong mayor powers. They can expropriate farmland, turn it over to developers to build housing for Muslims. To Muslims. So I got this little town here, they're all Christian. I'm not a Christian, but I don't care. You're a Christian, that's fine. All the power to you. God bless you. We drove by, Dixie and I, we drove by Tilsonburg, where they stole all this farmland to build housing projects. And there's a big billboard on the side of the road. Coming soon, housing project. And they got a big, colorful picture, high gloss picture of a nice family. Nice family. The family is Muslim. The woman is in a hijab, and the husband is in a, or whatever. So what does that tell you? So this little small town, because Canadians can't afford housing, they can't afford to buy a house. So who are they building all these houses for? Well, all these Muslim immigrants get interest-free loans from the government. You wouldn't know about that unless you were, we have our political team that looks into it and goes, holy shit, this is what they call halal loans. Look it up, halal loans. Government gives money to the Muslim immigrants and doesn't charge them interest because it's against the Muslim way. You're not supposed to charge it, so they call them halal loans.
Yeah, but in Muslim countries, the banks all charge interest.
Of course they do, only here because they want to swamp the last few white people with third world immigrants so that we'll all, get murdered in our sleep. That's why. It's to destroy our culture, But that's what's going on even in this small town. So you got to form communities, look after each other, pool your money, pool your resources. And it's a strategy from the 36 Strategies, my first book. It's called steal the firewood from under the pot, which means you've got to subvert the government's source of power. You've got to take away, slowly but surely, those things that feed the government, taxes, and obeying their rules, and getting their insurance policy. And all. We got to separate ourselves as much as possible from that, and we starve them out. They're going to starve us out anyways.
Mm.
But so we got to starve
Okay.
them out.
Yeah.
So it's been more than an hour, Judith. I better get going.
Yeah, and that is why I will end this now. So
Yes.
that was it. Night flight for today with Stefan Verstappen, and we see you all next time. Bye bye.